regard to Enterprise. 2 to beam up.
We are on to the next episode. Thank you, humans, for continuing to listen to us. Apparently, it's still interesting, I guess. I don't know.
I'm having a great time.
Yeah, it's interesting to me.
Are you inspired? You're still inspired?
What matters the most.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Paul needs to think it's interesting, too. Yeah.
I keep showing up, so there's something there.
There's something going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I need my daily or weekly dose of Brandon and new, fresh ideas. So it's kind of like my two favorite things all coming together.
That's right. My Paul dopamine.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's good.
Pulpamine.
Okay, I'm going to trademark that. Sounds like a colonoscopy drug or something. Blocked up.
Yeah.
Take this. But yeah, so, man, this week, I think I should just go first because Brandon.
Okay, go ahead.
Brandon has expressed that he's excited. He's going to go on for 3 hours.
I have a lot to talk about this week.
Yeah,
There's much to discuss.
Pull up your chairs. Get your tea.
Yeah, get your popcorn.
So, yeah, I'll just get mine out of the way then. Mine was miracles.
Ooh,
Like,
nice.
That's inspiring. And I don't know, like I've always kind of wondered what what entails a miracle. You know, is it something that's has to be life altering and big? Is it something that just maybe transcends the law of nature? Is it a good coincidence? Like, what is that really?
That's such a great question.
You know, when you really dive down into it, because everyone, throws the word around and, it kind of doesn't have a solid meaning. But I was like trying to think about that earlier because what sparked all this basically, as I was telling Brandon earlier, I was just like selling some stuff online and I had my stuff posted like $100 more than the cheapest person. And not once, but twice something got bought at like the higher price I had posted for no apparent reason. And so I just like, I thought it was a scam or whatever, but if it's legit, it's like basically a miracle. I don't know. Like I don't have a better context or frame to put that in.
People just gave you more money just because.
Yeah, like I'm not the highest rated seller. I don't have, more listings than anybody else. But for whatever reason, these two things got bought out.
Yeah.
At way higher prices. And so it's like, it's funny because it even shows some sales data and it's like 200, 215, 209, like 299. And it's like when my thing sold and I was like, that's so weird. Like why? I can't figure it out. So I'm like now on this rampage to figure out what miracles are.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, is a miracle something that's like unexpected? Is it, like these defying of the laws of nature, like I'm floating and levitating against gravity, like the law of physics has been like repelled by this miraculous thing. I don't know. Gosh.
Yeah.
I know.
Because to me, like, it's not working and stuff. It's like, it's great to have extra money coming in. And that is like a miracle to me in my circumstance. So
I think you could almost start backwards. Like, what is not a miracle? Like, what would not be considered miraculous?
People say like life is a miracle, So I don't know.
Because once you get into the idea of miraculous, you're starting to think that like God ordained something to happen. Like there is providence that basically like manipulated the world's like sequential order so that something different would occur that wouldn't have normally occurred,
Yeah, I guess by that logic, I think everything's a miracle.
But then it's like you could almost think everything's a miracle,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there is like that implied sense that it's like you mentioned, subverting like time or that's time-space continuum or something. Like everything was going to play out one way, and then all of a sudden something intervened, and then it played out a different way, But yeah, I mean, again, like if God always knew he was going to intervene at that moment, then that definition falls apart there.
Yeah, then it's like it's still according to plan because God planned it just like a long time ago.
Yeah. So it would more have to do with maybe going back actually to what you said even further. It's like something maybe unexpected that happens, where it's like, it's kind of like magic is some sort of miracle in some way, where it's like it's something beyond what we can comprehend that came out of nowhere. Whereas to maybe like some future race or whatever. It's just more technology because we've
Mhm.
discovered how it works.
Mhm.
Because I've always kind of thought that it's like, magic is basically technology of the future.
Mhm.
It's a ability or a manifestation of power that you don't understand.
Yeah.
And so technology is just a manifestation of power that you do understand or think you understand.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
because if you went back in time with your technology, and did, sent a message to someone else with a smartphone at that time,
That would be dark magic.
it would be miraculous.
That would be black magic.
It would also be that, yeah. And it would be miraculous if you didn't get burned at the stake. So, it's like you would use the same language of miraculous in a context of magic sometimes,
Mhm.
And so maybe that's more what it is, just from the perspective of the observer, if it's something that happens that kind of defies any current understanding of the universe or something, maybe.
Yeah. I think also when I hear miracles, I feel like it's something that's very subjective.
Mm-hmm.
Like a miracle is something that I think in my mind, oh, I wasn't expecting that to happen. Like maybe I would look at something as miraculous, but another person would be like, yeah, I don't know, it happens sometimes.
It's just how it works.
Yeah, I don't know, it's how it works. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like if I had never experienced some crazy phenomenon like, dude, there was a shooting star. I don't see shooting stars very often. That was miraculous. And somebody who like studies astronomy and they're like watching the stars all the time,
Actually, it's pretty
they'd
common.
be like, yeah, I see it all the time, and I'm out on my telescopes, and like whatever. It happens like every few
Black
days.
holes, though, are miraculous.
Yeah, yeah, and they would be like, yeah, something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does make a lot of sense when it's, like framed as the person observing it, kind of defining it in some sense.
Mm.
Because, yeah, that by that same regard, it's like two people could see the same event. One person sees coincidence or whatever force they want to label it as, randomness or whatever. And then if someone else has the framework of God and, him intervening in things, then it could be like that would be what you would attribute a miracle to, you know. Or if you're Buddhist or something, it's like the miracle is life itself, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's like whatever your framework is, just is how you define that event.
Well, that's a great point because there's so many times in the Bible where a prophet does a miracle or Jesus does a miracle, and it's like, look, I did this miracle, so believe what I'm saying. It's the truth, and people are like, nah, it's probably not. Like it's
Yeah.
yeah. Jesus like raises Lazarus from the dead, and the Pharisees are still like, you did miracles on the Sabbath. You're not supposed to do that. Regardless of the fact it's a miracle.
Yeah, that's the framework they care about.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I mean, I think about Elijah when there were all the prophets of Baal, and Elijah's like, just so you know, it's going to be a miracle when God burns up my sacrifice with fire. Let's like build a trench around it and dump a bunch of water on it and dump water like 3 times on it. And then I'm going to like call out to God. And he like does like it's like a 10-second prayer of like, oh God, you are the real God. Bring down fire on this thing so people believe you. And it's like, and like the dust is licked up in flame. It's like the whole thing is like obliterated. And it was
like molten glass.
It was like, just in case you didn't think this was a miracle, like it's super, super obvious this is a miracle. Just no mistakes here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because people would, any lesson people might not be convinced or something or whatever. Yeah. And that's, I guess maybe it's, if you kind of turn a blind eye to miracles or something, it's like maybe you don't see them and they're happening more than we think or something. Or maybe they happen as much as we pay attention. Because that could be a thing where it's like, if it is really just things that are beyond our understanding at any given moment, then if you like are going through life with an attitude of humility, then everything again goes back to where it's like everything becomes a miracle. Because like there's always going to be things beyond your understanding happening that are amazing, and so there will always be miracles happening around you. And so
I think also being aware of the miraculous is an attitude of humility, and I think an attitude of gratitude as well. Because if you're grateful for things, then you can appreciate the like rarity of something. Wow, that person, I never talked to that person. That was nice that they like came over and said hi, and like, oh, I feel like I connected with them. You know, it's like you can sort of appreciate the unexpected that might go on. Whereas if you're being ungrateful for things, good things happen to you in life, and you're just kind of like, whatever, I don't care.
Why wasn't it better?
Why wasn't it better than that? You know, I deserved better than that. You know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very corrosive mindset, unfortunately. It'll really rob you of joy. But yeah, that is true. Because yeah, it's really just boils down to like mindset, I think, in a lot of cases, and really just trying to grow those attitudes, you know, of humility and gratitude. I actually started I've done it before, but just like gratitude lists, you know, where it's like each day you just start out your day with that. And it's like, it's super cool. I actually look forward to it now. And it's like, because I think when I did it before, I have this weird mindset. And I don't know why it is, but I always feel like I'm just going to run out of things to be grateful for. And so like, I didn't want to, like, I was like, you know, it's like if you get a nice notebook or something and you don't want to fill it up because then it's going to be like gone.
Yeah.
It's like this weird scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, I don't want to write all the great things I'm grateful for because like, what if I run out and then I'm like, realize that I'm not eternally grateful? You know, it's like, oh, it was only 200 things that I was grateful for and now it's done, you know?
Oh, yeah. It just depends, I think, how like small you want to get, you know?
Yeah.
Like I did a gratitude journal, and pretty much every morning it would be like, I'm thankful I got good sleep and that the sunshine is out today, and I'm thankful for my coffee. Those are my 3 things.
Yeah. And I don't want to ever repeat stuff for whatever reason. So it's like, for me, that's like, I just get, like, I might be thankful for the same thing multiple days in a row, but I'm like, that's just a cliche at this point. Even though I'm like still thankful. I don't know. It's weird.
I think it's good to be thankful for the same things.
That's true.
You know, because otherwise you start taking it for granted. Like, I was thankful for sunshine, but like, not anymore. No, I'm still happy the sun is out. I'll be happy all summer that the sun is out.
That's true. Yeah. Huh. That's a good point. I didn't even think of it like that.
Yeah.
You've enlightened me, Brandon.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep writing the same thing every day.
No.
But yeah, that is a really good point. Huh. I have to reflect on that quite a bit.
What do you think is one of the greatest miracles to have happened? Besides Jesus turning water into wine. That was obviously justified people's drinking habits for thousands of years.
Ooh, that's a good question. Oh, man. Put me on the spot like that.
Yeah, okay. Maybe not. Just one that's maybe really iconic to you, or
sure. That kind of stands out as something unique.
That stands out.
I really like the kind of the woman who touched Jesus's cloak and was healed from bleeding. I think that's like something that stands out among miracles in some ways, because it's like a lot of the other ones, it was very much, you know, a disciple or Jesus like going and like actively like touching somebody or healing somebody, you know, but here it's like someone just touched him and then his power like left him and he noticed, which is weird.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
You know? And it was like, there's just so much about it that kind of defies the normal miracle prototype or something.
Yeah.
And then she has to like come forward afterwards and be like,
she's like confessing that she like sucked up one of his miracles.
Yeah.
You
know? And then she's like, yeah, it was me. Like, I'm gonna, like, I guess at that moment you'd probably even be scared that like maybe it was gonna be taken away or something too.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah. And and so you'd be in this weird situation where you like unintentionally like drain somebody.
Yeah.
And then thought you were gonna pay the consequences for it, but then instead you get, you know, admonished, or like, is admonished always negative? Or
I think admonished is kind of like a criticism almost.
yeah, okay.
I don't know if he did it. Did he admonish?
No,
what did he say?
He just said like go in peace or something.
He just kind of acknowledged her. I think just like, yeah, I healed you. Like, good job.
Go wash yourself or
Whatever.
something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, like maybe encouragement or something, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, what a weird roller coaster of emotions that would be.
Yeah.
Where you just
yeah. Do you think, like, when she touched him, do do you think he almost had to like accept the fact that somebody was seeking a miracle and like release that power to her, or do you think it like almost happened and he was like, oh, I just performed a miracle, I just farted, oh, I didn't even know that was coming out, like he just like, I just released a miracle, like where'd that miracle go? Who did that? Like he asks a question, but it's like, I wonder if he asks the question just to allow her to confess it, or if he asked because he like in his human form like genuinely didn't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I tend to think he knew and just kind of like wanted her to,
Yeah.
like, because that mirrors life a lot of ways, where it's like you kind of do it with kids too, where it's like, they took the cookie out of the cookie jar, but you're like, you want them to like,
where did the cookie go?
Yeah. I don't know, Daddy. Exactly. It's like, when your kid got up to something and you're like, is there anything you want to tell me? Type deal. Like,
and that's when the brother comes in and is like,
crumbs on his jacket. Exactly. He took it. Pretty much. Meanwhile, he's got like 3 cookies in his right hand,
He's got them like shoved down his pocket.
Yeah. He's the bad guy. Don't look at me. It's all him.
Oh man.
Yeah. That's too true. But
oh my gosh.
But yeah, no, I think he like probably wanted to like make an opportunity for somebody to, because again, like I think in a lot of ways that's what faith is. It's like you can say you believe all you want, but you don't know you believe until you're tested, and it's like, it's not to prove it to God. He knows exactly where you're at. It's like, I don't think testing is for God. It's like, what does that benefit him to like test you? It's like nothing. It's like, and so I think what testing really does is shows like growth in your life and character in your life coming forward, and then you can be like, because that gives you like almost a sense of identity. It's like, I made it through this hard thing. I'm the kind of person that like, looks after my friends and my family. I'm the I'm the person when things get hard, it's like, I don't give in to despair. I like keep going and I persevere. And it's like, that's what testing is. It's like, it really refines your character and tells you who you are about yourself. Because there's like endless quotes I think about that where, it's like, to find the measure of a man, put him in a storm or something like that, equivalent to that. But it's like when everything's going good and fine, you're not going to really know too much about your character or who you are. It's like anybody can be happy and treat others well when they're rich and people like them and plenty to eat and but then as soon as you lose a business or loved one and stuff and things start going poorly, it's like, well, then who are you? Kind of like the story of Job almost. So I think with like testing and stuff, that's where like it really helps you kind of solidify in where you're at and actually give you an accurate gauge of yourself, because that's where the identity portion comes in. It's like, you have to know that you don't know sometimes, or you have to know your failings to be able to really ask for help. Otherwise you're just like, yeah, I'm fine, I got it, and I'm good. When things are going good, but then those times that come, those times of testing come, and then you get the a big highlight and a big spotlight on the areas where it's like, oh, okay, I didn't trust as much as I thought, or I didn't oh, actually I wasn't as good of a friend as I thought. I got burnt out and I didn't have capacity to help anybody. Like, or I could help somebody this much, and then I reached my limit. I've kind of found that in times in my life where it's like, when things got really hard, it's like I had to cut back just like helping people or trying to do things for other people or whatever it was, or engage with people even, because it was just like I met my wall or my capacity. And I think that can expand and change, but it does give you a very clear boundary or at least marker of where you're currently at as far as your capacity to reach out or serve others or do whatever. So yeah. But yeah, I think so. Yeah, that miracle would ultimately be, I think, where the craziest. How about you? Is there anything that stands out? You mentioned Elijah, which is pretty cool.
I know. I do really love the story of Elijah. It's definitely one of my favorites that comes to mind. Yeah, I think recently I'm more interested in like the story of creation just because I've been studying that a lot lately. And it's like, dang, God created everything. That's a big deal. That's a miracle. You
Yeah.
know, that's an act of God.
Yeah, but like you don't often hear that referred to as a miracle, which is interesting.
No, yeah. Yeah, you think of miracles like Jesus rose from the dead or like this prophet called down fire, things like that. But
Hmm.
then when you think of, oh yeah, it all started with a miracle, which was God made everything. You
Yeah.
know, that was literally a supernatural event. There was like God and I don't know, nothing, whatever was there. And then God was like, let's make everything. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in some sense, that almost seems expected because it's like, well, why wouldn't he make everything? We're here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whereas like fire from heaven is unexpected because it's like, what purpose does that serve? Or it's kind of mysterious, It's
Mm-hmm.
like, why did that happen? But
Mm-hmm.
when God makes everything, it's like, well, of course he makes everything. Like,
Yeah.
then there wouldn't be anything if he didn't.
Yeah.
So it's like not as much of a miracle maybe in some people's minds, but I do agree it is.
Yeah, like in the sense that it wasn't a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
In that sense, it's not. It doesn't seem miraculous. But in the sense that it's like from the power of God, then it's like yeah, it's like super miraculous.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Just creating elements and the structure of everything. And yeah,
yeah.
that's super wild.
Hmm.
Does it give you any appreciation being like a creative type and I don't know, just like writing a story and thinking how hard that is to be like, I got to write the entire history of the world or like everything in the world and how it fits together. Like, does that give you any like appreciation for how grand just weaving everything together like that is?
It is interesting. Yeah, when you think about um, people who've written stories and they do world building and they get into like really detailed world building,
Mm-hmm.
and then you think about like, well, God is like the most detailed world builder. Like, wow, that took a lot of thought, but God's got a brain big enough to think those kinds of thoughts, you know? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty powerful.
Or it just happens maybe naturally, like where it's just an outpouring of his essence, in some sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because you wouldn't have to think about some things, like especially you watch like a painter as they get more advanced, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like you start to not think about like individual strokes or whatever. You can like you've been so ingrained in the medium that you're more thinking about like high level concepts at a certain point where you're like, so you might go from like individual brush strokes to now you're thinking about whole sections of your painting and contrast and color now, and then you're
Mm-hmm.
thinking maybe even at a broader sense about how the composition works and different things like that, so you're not even thinking at necessarily like a stroke level to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. And it's like just kind of happens subconsciously, like you know the strokes, how to mix colors, and so you're
Yeah.
not really thinking about that, and it's just like, but you're still doing it, but you're not consciously calling it to mind.
Right. Yeah. Just kind of that muscle memory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You just make stuff. You're in
Yeah.
the flow.
Yeah, and you kind of yeah, it's kind of just coming forward, and then you have like a high level idea of what you want
Mm.
or something, and then the work is more just like a byproduct of that in some sense.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Do you have any more thoughts on creation or things
Creation being miraculous. Yeah, I mean I think the way not only the creation story, like how creation occurred, that God spoke it, and like when you compare that to a lot of other ancient cosmologies, it's like, and there was this God and he had to like battle out with this other God, and then because he killed that God, he took his body and turned it into the earth, and there's always some sort of
super
like
common? Yeah.
yeah, there's always kind of this like origin story of violence and like the gods are battling and this one god rose to the mightiest, and it's like that's so God being made in the image of man.
Mm.
But when you see the biblical story of creation where it was like so effortless, it was like he spoke. It's like everything exists. Boom, there it was. Like I don't have to kill anything. Nothing's in my way to create stuff. Like I make what I want. And I
Mm.
make it when I want, how I want. I don't have to like he forged it out of the stars, and he like had to make this thing, and he worked really hard to create it. It was just like, there's light, like a planet over there. It was like, it wasn't hard, you know?
And then why did he rest?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if resting was like an exertion, you know? It's like, I
Yeah.
think resting is almost this symbol of like, and then he was able to enjoy it. And then he was like, the world was at peace. Things were as they should be. It's like a sign of completion, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think the rest is not in our sense of rest today, where we use a 7-day week and we get to Saturday and we're like, rest means I'm exhausted and I get to sleep in. It's like, I think his rest, I don't think God was sleeping in. I think his rest was like, let's all hang out and have fun. Let's go chase the zebras, you know, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not putting forward that intentional. I don't know. There is like a certain mindset that defines work, you know? It's like you can kind of even tell if you're not doing, even if you're not doing something laborious, where it's, you know, even if you're just on the computer, it's like if you're writing an email that's for work, it just feels different than if you're, you know, sitting around watching a movie or something. Like it just, for whatever reason, it's like it could both be watching a screen, it could even be watching a video for work, and one's for pleasure, and you can tell the difference.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. So, yeah, creation, Elijah, all kinds of good miracles, man.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that gives me some stuff to think about. And
Yeah.
yeah, let's jump into the deep dive here. Let's
All
go
right.
into the deep end of the pool.
Well, I have been watching Lord of the Rings lately, and I've been watching it with my wife, and she very patiently endures while I pause every 5 minutes and go, now let me explain the intricacies of what happened right there. You see, when Gollum did
Here's
this
what
thing,
happened in the books.
Here's what happened according to the books. Now let me also tell you the story of the actor. This is where Aragorn, Viggo Mortensen, broke his toe, and that's why the scream was like that. And anyway, it's like I explain all these weird details from every background. But one thing I've never quite studied in, you know, years of rereading the books and reading the Silmarillion and watching the movies and behind the scenes and all this stuff, I've never until recently, this most recent viewing of the story, looked into like the more Christological symbolism of the Lord of the Rings. And even though I think that it's very subtle, it's really
Lord of the
not.
Rings is not an allegory.
Yeah, I know,
Just-
right?
I'm
Like,
just kidding, I'm just kidding.
Tolkien originally said that.
No,
like,
yeah.
there
you,
was.
you can't write anything without having.
I know
like,
you
patterns.
Yeah,
or-
you just can't write something without patterns. And he had said, I can't remember what the specific descriptor was or category that he put his writing in, but it was like, I'm just writing something to be a good story, and if people find symbolism in there, then like they're finding it on their own, whatever. But there was actually some pretty, whether he like consciously did it or subconscious, I don't know, whatever. There was some pretty specific, like explicit Christology that was going on in there that I think now that I'm older, rewatching, and I've studied a lot more symbolism in the past few years, it's like, it just feels like it's screaming at me constantly. And I did quite a bit of research on it before chatting today because I wanted to make sure I was kind of getting things correct in some of my assumptions. But
That's cool.
it is super interesting when I look at it. It like, I love Lord of the Rings even more now, I have to say. So I'm hoping I'm sharing some Lord of the Rings love with the peoples today.
Well, that kind of almost reminds me already of like, you know, when we were just talking about God creating, or like, you know, and it being like, did he have to think about every like little system or whatever and weave everything together? It's like, you look at someone like Tolkien, he probably wasn't consciously doing that, but just because of his nature and what he believed, you know, all those patterns came out anyway in his work. So I kind of see like the tie to that creation there.
Yeah, that's possible, right? Yeah.
So what kicks us off here?
Well, let me ask a question, okay? Do you ever feel like you see a Christ figure appearing in The Lord of the Rings? Either a single person or maybe even multiple people who kind of represent Christ in different ways. It's subtle. It's like you have to dig deep a little bit, and I'll unpack it with you.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's hard because like I think Christ really embodies the good traits of what people can be. So you really can find, you know, it's like you can find themes of self-sacrifice. You can find themes of, like bearing your cross.
Mm-hmm.
You can find themes of even like healing to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of find the themes of like leadership and like following a spirit or something, or like a guiding principle. So yeah, I don't know, like it's hard. I think if I just had to like think of like messianic figures in some sense, obviously Gandalf, you have him like raising from the abyss or whatever,
Right, literally rising from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and not even like just the dead, but like an abyss.
Yeah.
So it's like of Moria.
Yeah.
So that's obviously there. Are we talking about just Lord of the Rings, or?
Yeah, just Lord of the Rings. Yeah, not The Hobbit, not getting into the Silmarillion at all. Just Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
Yeah, I think of like Frodo as carrying the cross in some sense, and then kind of he throws the ring in, and you could almost hear him saying it is finished.
I know, right?
at the end or something,
I know, right? Yeah.
And then he has to ascend to heaven in the gray heavens.
Yeah, basically. You're right on track, man. You're right on track with everything you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I don't know if I had to think of like a very noble character that I don't know exactly why represents Christ, but like Faramir is somebody that I always like look to as probably like one of the more noble characters, and kind of, I could relate that to the temptation of Christ, where he's like tempted in the desert, and it's like you could have, you could, whatever the temptations are, that the ring whispers to him, he kind of like does the right thing in the end, which is cool.
Yeah. And Faramir is an interesting one because you have this brother relationship where there's the older brother who's prized, and he's the one who falls to the temptation, but the younger brother who's kind of forgotten is the one who actually overcomes in the moment of temptation. When he has the chance to take the ring, he kind of starts out bringing it back to Gondor. He doesn't take it for himself, but he kind of is like, I'm gonna fulfill what my older brother failed, and then in the process he changes his mind and is like, no, actually, I'm not gonna do this.
Yeah.
Where Boromir didn't do that, and you kind of get that like firstborn versus the least of these kind of relationship.
Yeah.
In Lord of the Rings, yeah.
Yeah, he's always just been a character that really intrigues me.
Yeah.
Just for like a few different reasons, but
yeah.
Yeah. And so I think those are like when you ask me about those kind of symbols. That's what's.
What about like Aragorn? Do you see anything in that character?
I mean, yeah, I guess you could get like a Kingdom of Heaven type thing where he's like bringing back like a kingdom to Middle Earth. It's like he's kind of restoring the kingdom of men. Through like to its. Although it's hard to say with that because it's like, well, I mean, I guess in some sense, because like everything kind of changes. The elves are gone, so it's like it could almost be like the Jews are gone, and now it's like
I've never thought of that before.
And now,
oh my gosh,
and now it's it's
now
like
it's to the Gentiles.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
I've never thought of that. That's so funny. Oh man.
And so now it's like the the age of men.
Yeah. I was actually gonna.
People are gone.
I was gonna say you could almost think of it like what if there was a world? What if Middle Earth was the real world, and there was a time like before Adam and Eve or something when there were like elves and dwarves, but like their time with like knowing God has passed on, and now it's like becomes the time of the humans, and the humans. But anyway, that's an interesting thought. I didn't think of it as being like Jews and Gentiles. I didn't think of it in that relationship.
Yeah, I haven't until this moment.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay, so questions aside, I'll unpack a couple things I'm thinking about. One, when you look at the Old Testament, there's kind of like three different roles that you see in a lot of like leadership positions. There's oftentimes the priest, the prophet, and the king, right? And these are usually three different people, and you see all three of those roles kind of coming together in the person of Christ. Christ becomes the priest. He's the one who's like doing the sacrifices, and he's the one who's like the mediator and shedding the blood and forgiving the sins. He's the prophet in the sense that he's like telling people what's going to happen in the future. He's the teacher. He like knows people. He's like the voice of God. And then he's also the king. He's the one bringing in the new kingdom, and he's the one who's basically the leader over all leaders and the ruler, right?
Yeah, he kind of has the authority.
Yeah. And so when you look at Lord of the Rings, do you feel like you see those three types of characters portrayed in Lord of the Rings? We were already kind of saying them earlier.
Yeah, I mean, the Aragorn fills the king slot.
Aragorn's the king.
Gandalf's kind of the prophet.
Yeah.
And
Who do you think would be
priest?
a priest? Is difficult. Instead of thinking of a priest, think of like a sacrifice. Frodo, right? Yeah. So it's like you basically see three different aspects of Christ in like three different characters, and they're all basically like the main characters of the Lord of the Rings. Like there's a lot of sort of main characters, but I think those three are kind of like the top three big characters that you usually see
as far as like impact and stuff. Or,
kind of like their roles and what they are involved with. Yeah. And
yeah,
when you look at Frodo, he's basically like this innocent lamb. He's like grown up in this like very innocent place. It's kind of like a pasture, and he's sort of the smallest, most insignificant person.
Yeah.
He's pretty innocent, doesn't really know everything happening in the world, just kind of living his own life. And then he like chooses from the very beginning, like, I will take on this burden. And there's kind of, I think, you know, like you said, the cross earlier, sometimes people call the ring like the representation of sin because everyone's tempted by it. But it's basically, either way, it's like a burden to bear, like in the sense of almost like Pilgrim's Progress. It's like this burden that they has to like carry and then throws it in there. And then when he does that, it's like sin is defeated in a certain sense. So it's almost like he's bearing the cross, or he's like defeating sin, something like that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
And he basically, you know, gets wounded by it. He gets like stabbed in his side, which is almost like how Christ gets stabbed in his side a little bit, you know? So there's kind of some crazy stuff like that with Frodo. Then you look at, and
actually, I think the movies do kind of a good job of, like you were explaining, you know, it's like the three main characters. It's like the movies do a pretty good job of that, of like always kind of switching between, it's like either the hobbits, which is like Frodo's journey ultimately, or like Gandalf, what he's up to, and like, you know, recruiting people or doing whatever. And then, you know, it's like Aragorn. Like those are usually the three people like the movies follow.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah, like it kind of breaks away with like Merry and Pippin when they're with the Ents.
That's true, yeah.
But
even that's kind of Gandalf's story in some way.
Yeah.
Because he finds them.
Yeah.
And so it's like even in that little subplot, he's still involved, and he's the one that kind of like brings them back to the fold, I guess.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
And like in the books, it's basically like Frodo, because they basically have that weird split, you know, where it's like the first half of the book and the second half of the book. They used to frustrate me so much as a kid. It's so weird. Yeah. It's like no other books are really like that. I mean, I think he intended to originally write like 6 books, and then they put them into 3 and then whatever. But yeah, it's like basically the Frodo, Sam, Gollum story, and then kind of the like Aragorn, Gandalf, and everybody else story. You know, it's sort of split that way, which is interesting. So yeah, no, you have Frodo, and he's a Christ figure. He's like the sacrificial lamb. You have Gandalf. He's like the prophet, right? And he kind of like leads people and is the voice. He has all this knowledge about everything. He's like literally like sent by God to the people to like direct them. And he's like the one faithful prophet of all the other wizard people. And then you have Aragorn, and Aragorn's like the king of the lineage of, you know, Isildur, and people kind of don't think he's real, but then he like rises up and brings back like the world of men and creates a new kingdom for everybody. The other interesting thing is that all 3 of those characters basically have like a death and resurrection type scene. So when you look at Frodo, there's a scene where he gets stabbed by Shelob, and he basically gets like mummified by her webs. And Sam comes, and Sam thinks that he's dead. Yeah. Sam literally is like, oh no, he's dead right now. And Sam was mistaken, but it's sort of Frodo's like death moment. And then he gets taken into like the lair of the orcs, which is almost like taken into this evil place. And then eventually he like revives, and there's almost like a second death when he goes into Mount Doom. And when he actually goes into Mount Doom, it's like he casts away the sin, almost like he's in hell or something like that. And then he like emerges out of it.
On an eagle.
Right? And later he comes out on an eagle. And so he sort of goes through this like death and resurrection.
Which is like an ascension.
Yeah. Kind of this ascension. And then later, you know, you even mentioned it's like then he goes on to the Grey Haven. So he goes into heaven, you know, like he ascended. And then same thing with Gandalf. It's like he's literally fighting like a demonic figure, falls down into the abyss, and then comes out of it, and he's like resurrected, and he's like this new person. You know?
Is Aragorn the Paths of the Dead?
Say what? And Aragorn's the Paths of the Dead. Yeah, you got it. Yeah. He literally goes down to death, is like, I'm the Lord over death, and then comes out, and death is like subservient to him. And then he like diminishes death once and for all.
Yeah. Know? Yeah, he kind of, when he like sends them on their way or whatever, releases them from their oath. It's
You're free
like,
now. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's pretty crazy, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I like that. whatever that pattern is of like dying and resurrecting is just baked into reality. It's so wild. And that's why like sacrifices, I've been hearing it everywhere, but or in the circles I frequent in, it's like death is just, or like sacrifice is just the key to what sustains the universe. And it's like, I don't know exactly how it works or whatever, but it is like pivotal to reforming things or renewing things, or I don't know exactly what it is transforming, but yeah. So like, what I guess when those stories, like, what are their like, what is that going down into death and resurrecting? What does that like achieve? Are they like enlightened or unburdened or?
Yeah, I think that there's a certain aspect of like their identity that changes. Like remember with Frodo when he's on Mount Doom and Sam is like carrying him up and he's like forgetting things of the Shire. He's like forgetting who he was as a person. He's like, all I see is darkness now. But then when he casts the ring out and he is out on the rock and he's like relieved and he's kind of like talking with Sam a little bit and he's like, it feels great. And it's like, he's like free now, and it's kind of like his identity changed in the resurrection.
Is it kind of like maybe losing the power of death or something, like over a character or something, or like they don't have anything left to fear or something? Because you kind of see that in baptism, it's more like washing away the sins, like a representation of that, where it's like it is still a death, but like you come back like transformed or renewed or something, and so you come back as a different person, like you mentioned, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just think of it like when Jesus, like he died on the cross, he took on people's sins, he came as man, and then it's basically like he came back as like glorified man, like man as man should be, like the true Adam on earth, the resurrected Christ, So it's like he kind of changed his identity a little bit.
Well, that's how Gandalf came back. He was
Right.
like literally gray, and then he came back white. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's obviously the most on the nose one out of all
super
three.
on the nose, yeah.
But it is cool because like each of those three kind of encompasses like a little bit different part of it. It's like the Gandalf part doesn't necessarily focus as much on the like the descent to hell and like the conquering the death, but the Aragorn is very much there.
Yeah.
It's like the Frodo doesn't necessarily go as much into like going to conquer death as like, I don't know, his might be the hardest to like reconcile or whatever, but like he comes back as, I don't know, like maybe acceptance or something, or I don't know.
Yeah, it's well because you also have to remember that he comes back wounded, and it's like when Christ came back, he still had wounds in his hands and his feet, and so it's like Frodo comes back. I think that his identity changes from like the darkness, but he still kind of carries that like sign of like I still was the sacrifice, And so then that's where he like doesn't want to live in the mortal world anymore. He wants to go to the Undying Lands,
So maybe it's like because part of the resurrection feels like it's pointing towards heaven or like towards a future, in some sense. So maybe that's what his is like, representing that. Like where you're at currently isn't the end, or it's like that there's more to come or something. Because that would be very much his thing. It's like everyone else's journey kind of ends as soon as the ring's destroyed. They're like, okay, cool, we're good. Like there's not really that many orcs around, and let's go back to rebuilding. But then his is like, almost like I'm gonna go prepare a place for you, kind of thing, in some sense.
Yeah.
I don't think that's like necessarily what he's doing, but
I think it is interesting. I mean, when the ring is destroyed, Frodo writes his book, and then he goes to the Undying Lands. Gandalf, I don't know what he does. I don't know.
I think he goes with, doesn't he?
Well, he also goes to the Undying Lands. I don't know what he's really doing before he goes to the Undying Lands, but he also goes to the Undying Lands.
Smoking the good pipe weed.
Smoking some old Toby. And then you have, I almost want to say King David. Then you have Aragorn. And he's basically, setting up his kingdom, and so he's now like his future is now set before him to like be king.
But it's a very earthly realm, which you can almost see as like the kingdom of heaven or something. If it is truly the Gentiles or whatever now taking over. I mean, in a sense, but then so he could represent like the physical kingdom Frodo could be like the heavenly kingdom or something, and Gandalf could even be the spirit, because it's like you don't know the way the spirit blows or like moves, you know. And that's like his MO in his nutshell, is like, you know, even when it's, isn't there like a quote about that? It's like no one knows where the wizard wanders or something. I don't know. That feels very Lord of the Rings, but
I think
well, there's the Never Late one, but
there's the Never Late. I think Tolkien said, maybe back in The Hobbit, I think he said, "Not all who wander are lost."
yeah,
That's a Tolkien quote, and you see it like printed on stuff all the time. But
yeah,
I don't know. I can't remember exactly which book that's from, though.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
that is the Hobbit, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. I guess yeah, you could even see like, I don't know. Yeah, interesting. Because I'm like trying to think if there's like maybe an equivalent to the prophet, king, priest thing, you know, that like gets flipped, or like maybe there's new titles for those things, but
Oh, like in the New Testament? Or
yeah, or
I think in the New Testament it switches to apostle, teacher, and
like elder or something.
maybe it's elder, or like, yeah, there
Or
is an
like,
equivalency of like the king, prophet, priest roles in the New Testament after Christ comes and ascends, and in the early church they had kind of a flipping of that into a new church
yeah.
role. I can't remember what it was though, something like that. Yeah.
It was actually weird. Before I'd even like heard about all this stuff, I'd come up with my own system or whatever for how things are like transmitted into the world. And so it was oh man, I thought I spent so much time thinking about this, but now I can't even recall it. But basically it was like artist, philosopher, leader, follower. And so basically like for any new information to enter the world, it kind of like enters through this chain. And so you have, you know, your contained world or your sphere where like everything is known, like all known possibilities, or like what humanity collectively knows. But then there's things that come from the outside, you know, and it's like the people that are closer to the outside of that sphere, like on the edge of that bubble, they can kind of like reach out into the unknown or the madness or whatever, and kind of like pool new ideas that are going to shape humanity, you know. And so it's like, you know, the artist is kind of, you know, always seen as like the crazy person, or like the true, like the, I guess not true artist, but yeah, I guess maybe like, yeah,
like sometimes people think like they've lost their grip on reality or something, but maybe that's because
Yeah.
they're so much on the borders of like the real world, like you're saying, they're
Yeah.
like grabbing into the
Yeah.
outside of something.
and you never know what you're going to find out there, you know.
Yeah.
It's like some of it's useful, some of it's just complete nonsense. And
Yeah.
you know, 'cause what's the difference between like a very novel idea and complete nonsense? It's like not that much, you know. Most people won't recognize it either way, you know.
Yeah.
If it's something truly new and unique.
Yeah.
And so I think like a lot of artists, especially great artists, will play on the edge of that, like what's, you know, even known or acceptable to society, and then it's kind of gets filtered through that. And so I think what philosophers do is they kind of, like, I always see philosophers throughout history, and they're always inspired by artists. You know, they just like love taking in like artists and, you know, these like interesting ideas and emotions and stuff. But then I think what they do is they're kind of like almost a refining plant, where they take in all this like almost noise or unintelligible information that the artists are producing, because the artists don't care why they're making, you know, like they're driven, they're tortured, they just want to make stuff, you know. And so that they're not worried about like trying to sort out what it means, they just make it. And so the philosophers kind of take this almost like raw ore or something of ideas.
Chaos.
Yeah, and they just like sit and mull on it and chew it and like go over it, and it's like, well, what does this crazy idea mean, you know? It's like someone unearthed it, but like now we got to like contain it and put like, you know, figure out how it's useful to society or what it means, or like
To bring order to it.
kind of, yeah. Yeah, and they really, you know, take that idea that's like not really usable by anybody. It's like you look at, you know, avant-garde art, it's not usable by anybody, it's just like completely useless. And so then the philosopher will take that and then put it in like context that people can understand. Specifically, I think then that's what like leader type people really pick up on. Like they, you know, they study the philosophers, and they like, you know, try to find these good principles, and they, you know, really are good at putting them into practice and understanding them and distilling them. And so you have like, you know, they just like eat up everything philosophers do, and they just really like try to soak it up. And then they're not coming up with new ideas necessarily, but they're kind of, they take these more high concepts and like really deep, dense things, and then they kind of distill them in such a way that like just anybody could understand. And then you have like follower people who just,
Do it.
you just do it. Yeah.
No, it's true. The leaders kind of take the philosophy into a practical application, This is the philosophy of capitalism. Let's make it so.
Yeah. And then you have Donald Trump. And then millions of Americans are like, make America great again.
Right.
It's like, that's not a philosophical idea. That's just something that sounds good that people can rally behind. But it like has meaning. Yeah. But it's just been distilled from like,
Like Trump's not a philosopher. He's just implementing ideas.
Yeah. And he knows how to, say it in such a way that like, his bigger, the bigger ideas can get distilled into these sound bites that people just latch on
He's
to.
just super good at marketing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yes. He is a marketer. Yes.
Yeah.
He really is.
And a leader,
Yeah.
It's like people just naturally are drawn to
wanted
him.
to follow him. Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
And so I'm sure he gets his like ideas from somebody else, or whatever, or like his ideas or messages of distillation of, these higher level concepts. But, he's just really good at packing them down into like little sound bites and just sending them out. And
so is Trump Aragorn?
I don't want to say, yes.
There's a sound bite for you.
Oh no. Oh no, he might be.
Yeah, I don't know if he is. I think he's more like Nebuchadnezzar. He was the necessary evil.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You can have leaders that are like very much on every spectrum of, just because you're a potent leader doesn't mean you're good. We see that throughout history.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think they're in the same sphere, but radically different moral applications.
Yeah.
And that's why I think you need more good leaders, because it's like you're going to have to, it's like people are going to, like followers are going to follow. And those are the people that like get stuff done and like really take the simplified ideas and just make them work and like make reality the way it is. So it's like, you might get into this thing where it's like, well, aren't the, philosophers or artists better than the followers? It's like, well, no, because without the followers, you actually like literally reality wouldn't function, or like the actual physical world wouldn't function. So it's like you need every tier of that, that space.
Yeah.
So which one are you?
I don't know, man. I'm probably in the leader category. I don't know if I'm an artist or a philosopher. I think I dabble in those things, but I think really I just want to be like, I see your chaos. Let me bring order to it and implement to the people. Yeah. And the people is this.
I think it's like, I would say the same thing. Actually, I was going to tell you if you didn't know, but I've already labeled everybody.
You've already labeled me.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
All right. So the real question is, am I Aragorn?
Could be.
Yeah.
I think that's where the cool thing is. It's like everybody has the opportunity to be the best version of these patterns. Like I was actually just watching a video the other day about it's called the 9 Worthies in the medieval history. And so there had been like this, concerted effort to find like the 9 most noble people in history. And so they had, 3, this is going to sound like a Lord of the Rings poem or something, but they had 3 of the Jews, 3 of the Gentiles. They had 3, was it 3? Yes, there's 3 more. It was like basically Christian, Jewish, and maybe it was like just conquerors or something, or like just people in history. No, because those would be the Gentiles. But yeah, it was people like, and then maybe it was like 3 saints.
Okay.
I think.
Not 3 Muslims. 3 monotheistic religions.
It was a very Christian time in Western Europe at that point. But yeah, you had the people like Julius Caesar or Hector of Troy and King Arthur. You had Joshua from the Bible. You had he was one of the Jews. Someone of the Maccabees, and just so these different people, but like they all kind of encompassed, like they were trying to find out like what's the pinnacle of these different characteristics that you can have, and so it was all kind of like summed up in these people, and so you would have something to aspire towards, and like pointing out different characteristics. And so like not every person was um, to be emulated for different things. It's like you didn't want to be Julius Caesar for being a good friend. It's like he was someone that like really was like great at like managing an empire and taking territory and being efficient with his like actions and really decisive and stuff like that. And but someone like King Arthur, it's like you wanted to emulate him because he was chivalrous or he was very fair to people and that kind of stuff. So even within those there was like different subtypes of things that you really wanted to like lift up and praise. And so I think you could be Aragorn if you want.
Yeah.
Or
well,
you can at least aspire to it.
Well, in a shared thought of like Aragorn as like a leadership person, not obviously I'm not good at wielding swords and running around.
Not yet.
I've never taken like a plant and stuck it into somebody's wound and like healed them of demons or whatever, so
maybe using the wrong plants.
Maybe I'm using the wrong plants.
Yeah.
Found these mushrooms. They're gonna help you. I don't know.
That's what people believe nowadays.
I'm just gonna grab some grass and be like, "This is the Ethelus plant. Eat it."
Start making up names for everything.
Yeah.
Well, the cool thing is you can actually do that in real life. I mean, there's so many like beneficial plants that if you really, I don't know. This is something I've always wanted to do, but I haven't had a chance yet. Is go out with like a local forager, and it's actually really interesting just from the videos I've watched. Because it's like they'll just be walking through the forest and like, I mean, just even out here in Idaho, it's like, I don't know. I'm going to make up a number. 60% of all the plants are edible or beneficial. And
that's right, 100% of the time.
Yeah, you can take that to the bank.
60% of the plants can be eaten 100% of the time.
And you can take that to the bank unless your bank is being foreclosed on. So take out all your money.
Bank is in Silicon Valley. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man. We're time-stamping this video.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually just talking with my wife about that the other day. I was like, I really want to go on a hike around here someday with somebody who knows all the local plants and can just point things out. Because we did that when we were in Belize. Our tour guide would just like pick stuff up off the ground, just like pick something off a plant and like, here, chew this and spit it out. Oh, did your mouth go numb? That's because it's a natural numbing agent. This is where we got this plant, this medicine from, whatever.
Yeah.
And they're like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Isn't
that? Yeah. And like everything has like its own little corner case use and yeah. When you really know that stuff, it's kind of wild, like how you could, I mean, just even growing stuff or like going through people's gardens, like in northern Idaho. It's like there's like even stuff that grows on the side of the gardens that's like considered weeds, I guess, or whatever. That's like completely edible and fine. And I'm like, for me, like trying to eat naturally, I'm like, well, why aren't you harvesting this and eating this? And like, it's basically a weed. I mean, you can eat it; it's good for you, but it's like, I don't know, we're growing this other stuff over here.
Yeah.
I'm like, can I have it? I'm like, yeah, get it out of here. So it's like even some like the weedy type stuff is like, totally nutritious and like if you were to eat it, you could. And so it's like there's a lot of untapped resources, or I mean, even just go like huckleberry picking up here, and it's like you can just pick for a week straight.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, which is very fun to do actually.
Yeah,
picking.
Yeah, it's cool. Interesting. So yeah, with Lord of the Rings,
huckleberry picking, weeds, plants.
I'm trying to
Christology.
I'm trying to tie it back somehow.
Yeah.
But is there? Okay, so there's the Christ symbology. Is there any others?
Oh yeah, there are totally other. Yeah, I mean the Christology of the Lord of the Rings, I think, is the main theme. I think that's like the top thing. But if you want to dive into other stuff that's like symbolic with Lord of the Rings, I mean, you've got Smeagol, which is crazy because Smeagol is basically like the dehumanization that sin causes. Like he basically just obsessed over the ring until sin became his like sacred idol.
As the Orthodox would say, your passions.
Yeah, your passions. And then his precious. And then it got to the point that it like literally split apart his personality. And it's like it literally like destroyed him as a person, and he almost became like possessed in a certain way. That's like the Gollum like spirit came inside of Smeagol and caused him to like murder and do all these things. And so it's like there's where you see, okay, the corruption of the ring that causes you to become this person, you know.
Hmm.
The other interesting thing.
I'm gonna have a question on that.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, ask your question then before I
Yeah.
get too far.
Yeah, because like I've been fascinated with the idea of like spirits and just inhabitation and where do your desires come from and all that kind of stuff. So to me that makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
But like, because it almost seems like there was, like you pointed out, like he at some point things split or like got to the point of no return without some sort of like outside intervention, which almost could be Frodo in some sense, which kind of brought Smeagol back to the light,
Yeah.
or that part of him back to the light.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wonder if there's like parallels to nowadays where it's like, you see more and more people like snapping with like school shootings or whatever. It's like, and you always like hear their stories and they were like ruminating on this stuff for like long periods of time and like indulging thoughts and like, these patterns that were just like getting ingrained for years and resentment and like all these things. And so I kind of see that as maybe like a sin thing. But yeah, like I wonder if there's parallels for that for like our modern day where, people are very much, because in the or like I guess the Bible, it's like you see demon possession as a very like black and white thing. It's like, oh, he was possessed. It's like, but what does that really look like? Like some people obviously had seizures or whatever, but
Yeah.
Other people like maybe they were just in a really dark place,
Yeah.
with like all these voices, just constantly like losing their identity in some sense. And what Christ is doing by like dispelling those demons is also giving the people their identity back.
Yeah.
Because you kind of see that with the guy at the tombs or whatever. It's like as soon as he casts out the demon, he's like, okay, yeah, go get some clothes and go eat. It's like that identity has been restored.
Yeah.
Because like it hasn't been taken over by this other golem, figure.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that was my thought.
Yeah. No, I think you're totally right. In like a real world idea, if I were to get really practicalities here for the people.
Give people something to follow.
That's right. I just see it more like when a person is basically being dehumanized. Like when you know that you're at a place of this is the standard of like who I am and what I'm capable of, like my dignity, my honor as a person, and I'm almost like falling shy of that. Like I'm like less than I could be or should be, And when somebody's just hiding in their cave, dwelling in darkness, whether it's like sin or you're like somebody's falling in some horrible way.
Better open up my curtains.
Yeah, and I better open up the windows, let some fresh air come in. They've been molding in their BO for weeks. Then oh man, it's too real. Then it's like, who did they become at the end of this? Did they become less than somebody that they were before, or that they know they could be as a person? Yeah. And I think that's when you get the Gollum figure, that's when you get the Smeagol.
Yeah. What's interesting to me is like whether that comes through, because this is where we'll have our probably endless free will debate, it's like whether that comes through, because obviously like he's tormented by the ring, which is like an external thing. It's not like he picked it up. And that actually, I'm going to start using this for my free will arguments, because I always use like, you get the choice to be in a river that pulls you along in one direction, but you don't get to like, once you're in that river, you're in that river. Like the choice is just to be in one or the other. But with the ring, it actually makes a lot of sense, because it's like, you can choose to pick the ring up, but once it's up and like you're in your possession, you're getting transformed whether you want to or not, regardless of your free will or your choice. It's like you're literally possessed. And so like the choice is to not pick the ring up, and that's where you get your free will. But once you've picked it up, you lose your free will until you either throw it away again or something bites your finger off and falls into a volcano.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I know. Well,
which is an act of like mercy or grace or something.
I'll say one more thing about Gollum, and then I've got to come back to something that you said right there. The other interesting thing with Gollum is it's like, well, okay, a couple of the things that are interesting with Gollum is that he basically is, gosh, where do I want to begin with this? He basically swears himself to Frodo, to the Lamb. And then when he betrays in the end and he like bites his finger off and he gets the sin, he then basically getting the sin and betraying the Lamb is like his undoing and leads to his death. And the interesting thing is
blaspheming the Spirit.
He's blaspheming the Spirit in a certain way. But the other interesting thing is it's like he literally swears, like at the very beginning, Two Towers, when he gets captured by the hobbits, he literally is like, I swear to serve the master. And he's like, there's no oath you could say that'll hold you to it, like you're a liar. And he's like, I swear on the precious. And then he's like, oh, the precious is treacherous and it'll hold you to your vow. And what happens, he breaks his vow and the precious holds him to it and kills him. And so it's like, basically, he like tries to follow this oath in order to sneakily, like, he's playing the long game to try to get the ring. But even like sin kind of finds you out. Like, eventually your consequences of
It's
sin,
like Cain,
like, do you
sin is
in.
knocking at your door.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Huh.
There was one other interesting thing I was going to say with Smeagol. Oh, yeah, and it's the idea that Frodo tries to call him out of that by using his true name. Gollum calls himself Gollum, but then when Frodo says, you weren't so different from a hobbit once, I think your name is Smeagol. And then he's like, oh, my name. Like, I forgot who I was. And that's when, right after that, he basically has this internal battle where he's like, no, I don't want to do that. And Gollum's like, you need me. And like, no, I don't want to do that. And then he basically abandons the Gollum and chooses not to be Gollum anymore. And he's like the true version of Smeagol for a little while until he feels like the master betrayed him. And then he's like, Gollum comes back. And then he like returns to his personality again.
It's like preying on his doubts or something.
Yeah. So anyway, just a little tangent further with Gollum. But back to the whole free will discussion. It comes to an interesting point. Certain people take the ring and they give into the temptation. Other people are able to resist. What allows people to resist the ring? And that's an interesting question. And you have several people who are basically confronted with the temptation of the ring. So I'll go through some of those. Like, you have Sam. At a certain point, Sam takes the ring. He literally like picks it up and wears it, and then he gives it back to Frodo in the end. You've got Aragorn.
He doesn't even really get tempted when he does that, huh?
Yeah, well, he kind of holds it in the movie. He kind of is like, I don't know. And Frodo's like, give it to me. He's like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, he kind of like wants it a little bit,
Okay.
And so you've got Sam, you've got Aragorn, where he's like holding it out to him. And he's like, would you destroy it? And then he closes it and is like, I would have gone with you to the end. You've got Gandalf, and Gandalf is like, don't tempt me. Like, I can't even handle it. Like, you don't get it.
I won't even barely want to look at it.
I think one of the most obvious ones is with Galadriel, because he's like, I'll give it to you. And she's like, you'd give it to me freely? And she has her whole little fantasy. And then she's like, no, I passed the test. Like, I will diminish in the West and be Galadriel. And she's like proud of herself. Like, I've resisted, But then you've got people like Boromir who can't resist. And you've got even Frodo, he can't resist. Gollum can't resist. Bilbo kind of has a freak out, but, he like sort of wants it, but then doesn't,
Yeah.
So you've got some of these characters who are like really good at resisting and some who like cannot resist at all. And what makes one character able to resist and others not? What do you think? And I don't necessarily have a right or wrong answer. I don't really know. But
Yeah. You're not going to yell wrong at me as soon as I start talking?
that was wrong. That was wrong.
I had to bring it back.
China can't resist.
The one ring. One ring child policy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Oh man.
I don't know if I really know the answer to it.
Well, because it's kind of like, I mean, they allude to that it's, based on like kind of the wearers or like the possessors, like natural influence from the rest of the world even. It's like the hobbits don't really care with what's going on in the outside world, so it's like it doesn't affect them in that way. So it's almost like this simplicity or something where, if you're not influenced by other things, then the ring won't influence you. Because it's like but like men, they care a lot about their kingdom, they care a lot about their family ties, they care a lot about the world, and the commerce and this and that. So they have like more just desire in general for things. And so it's almost like they have more cracks in their armor that the ring is able to like penetrate into in some sense. And then, I could even see that extending to like Galadriel or Gandalf, where it's like like they almost know everything about how the world works. They know like all the inner workings, all the magic. They know, all these like crazy different systems and politics and everything. It's just like all tied up in their being, and so it's like the ring just has like almost infinite ways to tempt them or something, to like use it, to misuse it in some sense. And so, and when they do misuse it, the consequences would even be higher because of their innate power.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. That's why they're resisting it necessarily, but I think it just has more ways to tempt them. Whereas hobbits, like they care about food,
and smoking
and smoking,
and gardening, because
yeah.
they're an Eden analogy anyway.
Yeah, there you go.
They're gardeners anyway.
So it's like, what are you going to tempt a hobbit with? It's like, I'll give you armies, and they're like, like I'll give you the Shire. We already have the Shire. Like, what do you?
A lot of weed.
Yeah. It's like, okay. It's like,
yeah, I know.
What would you do for that? And like, probably not much. I'm pretty lazy.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, the lack of desire kind of defeats evil in some sense. And like, I think that's where if you can be like satisfied in Christ and find your fulfillment there, it's like the world really doesn't have that much on you.
I think you make a really good point with that. There are people who are satisfied in things other than the ring, and they're the ones who are able to resist, versus the people who find their satisfaction in the ring, who are the ones who want it. And I think the other thing is there are people, there's kind of like this language that people use when they talk about the ring that's almost this like, I deserve the ring. The ring should be mine, Yeah. Like Boromir kind of thinks that it should be his, and even his father, Denethor, kind of thinks like, bring me this kingly gift, like give it to me, It's our blood that's being shed. And Gollum's like, my precious, and you stole it, you're thieves, it was mine. I don't know with Saruman. I mean, he's kind of, I don't know if he thinks he deserves it. He definitely wants it and thinks that he can be like probably more powerful than Sauron if he has it, but I don't know. It's kind of interesting.
I think, I mean, he might feel like he deserves it in some sense because he has like the power to wield it correctly.
Yeah.
Or like to its full extent. It's like all these people would just use it to try to get Gondar back, but he's like, I could use it to like, rule the world in a efficient way or something like that.
Yeah.
Or like an iron-fisted way that like didn't, because like I guess when I see him, I see like a lot of just wanting to, like it's almost control for the sake of control. Which I mean, I guess Sauron could kind of be like that, but he's more of like a corrupter or like like he wants to kind of subvert the fabric of reality, where like Saruman just wants to control the physical world in some sense, Yeah. It's like he doesn't really care about probably other Maiar or like, other spirits or whatever. He's not gonna mess with that. But like I could see Sauron being like, okay, we're gonna march on Valinor now or something, or like it needs to be all encompassing, where Sauron just wants to like just have control of the world and like put it in these boxes and efficient machines and that kind of thing.
You're absolutely right on that, and that's the contrast with Saruman, is that he basically brings industry to nature, and he kind of like destroys the created nature in order to create like too much order, It's like he takes the forest of Fangorn and turns it into the machine of war.
Or it's like you even see that kind of imagery in the movies too, where it's like even in the architecture of how like when you see Mordor or whatever, it's like it's not like machines everywhere and stuff. It's like black rock and lava, and like it's still wild, in some sense. It's not like a like there is obviously like some factories and stuff, but it's not like it's more of like a dark presence than a military camp that's like completely set up and properly maintained and ranks. We don't have like ranks of Uruk-hai standing there. It's always mobs of orcs, and it's like the kind of there's no symmetry. It's just like the spreading plague almost or something.
Yeah, it's true.
But, yeah, I do like the idea, or like your thought about who does the ring corrupt. I think that's gonna be something I'm thinking about for a while.
Yeah. I think it's this pride before the fall kind of thing. This people who like think that they can handle it, they have the power to wield it, or they deserve to have it in some sense, or somehow it like belongs to them or something. Yeah.
Well, that entitlement is just so dangerous. It's like you know, because you can justify anything at that point
Yeah.
if you feel like you deserve it, you know, because then it's like, yeah, I'll step over whoever I need to get there because it's
Yeah.
like it's my rightful thing, you know.
Because I deserve to rule Europe. Yeah.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
Well, and you get, you know, going back to the people that were able to resist, it's like it feels like a lot of the people that were really tempted to take it that didn't just like accidentally get it. Speaking about Gollum,
Mm-hmm.
in some sense, like they all wanted to see the world different
Mm-hmm.
and weren't able to trust the process
Mm-hmm.
of how the world would become different in some sense. You know, it's like they felt like they needed to take the quick fix to like make the world the way they wanted to see it or better, you know. And it's like it's kind of like that thing where it's, you know, the path to hell is paved with good intentions, where you know, people are like, I mean, like or most dictators have thought they were like doing, you know, trying to serve humanity in some way, of like, you know, making it more ordered or like fixing the genetics of the planet or you know, bringing about some golden age. And it was always, you know, taking matters into their own hands, which like ultimately led to like the biggest problems. And so I think, you know, it's like people who were okay trusting this almost esoteric journey of Frodo, where it's like, what do you mean he's just going to walk into Mordor across the whole area? It's like, that doesn't make any sense. Like conventionally, like it's like a very spirit journey where, you know, you on the spirit's journey, like I'm speaking about Holy Spirit in some sense, but it's never like a straight path, you know. It's never like a logical thing. It's always like you're always here, then there, and you have to like take this little detour, and then you face a setback from either your own actions or your own whatever life, and then you know you meet someone over here who sends you this way, and it's like this divine appointment, you know, of like meeting somebody, and then they give you like the piece of information that you needed next, and then you know it's never just like you might have the destination in mind, but how you get there is always kind of a mystery, and it usually like defies the logic of the world, you know, because it's like anybody else sees that and it's like, well, we should just round up every, you know, Gondorian we have and send them with the ring and we'll go fight and just smash through and get to Mount Doom, you know. It's like, I mean, like the obvious answer is he has a lot of orcs, so we're gonna have to have a lot of people, you know, and just grind and try to make that work, you know, versus kind of like finding a different way. And so yeah, I think that like very much embodies that kind of like principle, because it's like Frodo's journey is just like so wild, you know, and it's like twisting and turning, and you know, even the fact that he meets Smeagol, or you know, like you know, things that are meant for or that are bad that get turned to good, you know, or vice versa. And there's like all these reversals and stuff. Whereas, you know, I think people who wanted to take the shortcut would have just gotten. I mean, it's kind of alluded to that even, I think, a little bit in the story. It's like the people that would have taken the shortcuts or tried to rely on like military might would have just gotten crushed.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And I think in that sense, you get two things. You get one, a little bit of Frodo's story reflecting like Pilgrim's Progress, where he's going through this whole symbolic journey, and you get him kind of being the Christian who's taking the hard path to like get the burdens off and find Christ and go to heaven. But I think also you get a little bit of when Jesus came and people thought, oh, you're going to like bring in a new kingdom. This is a political thing. You're going to destroy the Romans now and like usher in like New Jerusalem. And really he was like, no, I'm a sacrificial lamb. I'm going to die. And where it's like Sauron's looking at it thinking they're going to all come fight me and they're not going to like destroy the ring. That would be crazy. And instead it's like, no, secretly we're actually going to destroy the ring. And the war was like almost a diversion. Like that wasn't the real thing happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if in some sense that's what's happened when Jesus came. If like, I don't know, demonic forces like ramped up to like have a battle or something, and he was like, or like, I mean, in some sense it did happen that way, because like whatever the world was conspired to kill Jesus, which was the battle, or like a type of battle, you know, or war. It's like, in a sense, like that was the enemy trying to win, was to like, you know, the systems of earth conspiring to kill Jesus. Like that was the plan to win. And then in the end, it's like reversal. You know, it's like you thought you were winning when you know, came out of the Black Gates and crushed our army, but it was like you actually just sealed your own fate in some sense.
Yeah.
By turning your attention over here when then, him dying was like the ultimate like winning. Not to quote Trump.
The ultimate winning.
Or just winning. Doesn't he say that?
Win.
Yeah.
Just saying winning is a quote now. Winning.
Win more.
Win more. Win bigger. More bigger. More bigly winning.
Bigly winning. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, one last thing with Lord of the Rings, and then I'll be content. The other thing I was gonna say is there's an interesting aspect with Sauron where he doesn't have a personhood. He's just an eye. And it's almost like this representation of Satan not really being like a person, but he's kind of this like almost anti-God in the sense that God is somebody who is like his eye is fully open, and God is like somebody who like is the light. He sees everything. Not only in that like he sees you when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake. Not only in that sense, but also in the sense that it's like God has like full understanding. Like his eyes are like illuminated, But then there's almost like a weird parallel with Sauron where he is like the eye, but he also lives in a land of darkness. And he kind of like sits on top of this tower. They could almost be like a Tower of Babel, like reaching
Tower
up to
of
God.
Illuminati.
Yeah, the Tower of Illuminati, And it's like he like poses as an eye. He's not a person. He poses as an eye. He lives in a land of darkness, and he basically like thinks that he can like see everything, but he like can't quite see his own spiritual folly and like where he's at as like a being, And so there's sort of like a weird opposing relationship of Sauron being the anti-God figure, which is kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that gets like, that's such a complex one because you have even like where, you still have Melkor. It's like, what do you do with that? Like, is he the original like Satan figure?
I know.
But like maybe, I mean, I guess Tolkien knew that, right? When he was writing that there was a Melkor or something, right?
Yeah.
So like he would have known that. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think there is some. I mean, you got obviously like the tower in the eye, like that's a really iconic ancient symbol.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you see that on the dollar bill, even. It's like the pyramid with the eye on top.
With the eye. Yeah.
Yeah. And it could be like an all-seeing state or something that tries to like, institute social credit or whatever analogy you want to use.
Big Brother's watching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's obviously those kind of analogies.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, you could say like disembodied. It could be like you could equate it to kind of the post crucifixion of Christ, where it's like, I guess like the devil's defeated for a while and then he comes back or something. Like I don't know if you could find parallels there or something.
Well, that was back with Morgoth when I think Morgoth was imprisoned for like a super long time and then they freed him. And that was almost like Satan was in prison and then they freed him kind of thing.
Maybe Sauron's the beast.
Maybe Sauron's a beast.
It's like he had the fatal wound that was, like supposed to be was supposed to kill him, but he was like really a spirit, like coming back or whatever.
That could be. I think. Well, one of the things with Sauron is that he's basically the deceiver, because he deceived the sons of Numenor to basically fall, and so he was the one who basically created the fall of the men.
Is he the snake then?
So yeah, he could be more of like a sort of like snake deceiver figure in that sense. The
snake in the garden.
Yeah, could be more like that. Oh, which actually reminds me. Okay, another thing to think about. Don't look at our record time. The other thing to think about was how you had Sauron, who's the deceiver, then you had Saruman, who's like a betrayer, and how Saruman in the books, they don't portray this in the movies, but in the books he had like a white cloak, but then when he became a betrayer, it was actually a multicolored cloak. And it was almost this like, I went from pure light and whiteness to being like a little bit of everyone. And like I'm a little bit of everything.
He's like representing himself very differently to like different people or something.
It's like instead of following the one way, I'm now like kind of going with all the ways. And it's almost this like departure of the truth to like the truth is whatever it could be. And then the other interesting thing is how he sets up his own sort of puppet deceiver. So you can kind of see these like tiers of deceivers. It's like there's Melkor, and then Sauron, and then Sauron, and then you have Wormtongue. Just the name Wormtongue. I mean, it's like, dude, that just, if that doesn't bring you to like, like a worm in an apple in the Garden of Eden, that's like a serpent that's deceiving people kind of imagery.
Yeah.
And so then he's deceiving, the King of Rohan, and then even the King of Rohan has kind of a resurrection. But he basically comes, and what happens to Saruman? He's killed by his own deceiver. And that's sort of like an ironic little twist there.
Yeah.
Where it's like he had his puppet person who then like killed him, and he fell off his tower.
Puppet's not on strings anymore.
Nope.
Age of Ultron. There's no strings on me. Yeah.
So, anyway, those are my final thoughts. That's all
Yeah.
my Lord of the Rings symbolism for now.
Yeah, till part 2. You get to you can talk about Lord of the Rings every week. I can talk about AI every week. We'll call it good. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, those patterns, like you said, they always repeat themselves, like at fractal levels and micro scales. But then, yeah, it's like a lot of times, whenever you see a pattern of evil, it's like usually self-defeating, kind of like you mentioned, being stabbed by your own little puppet. Like, I think unless you're unless you're the ultimate evil or something, you'll always get. It's like Star Wars and the Jedi, right? Like, or the Sith. It's like the only way the apprentice levels up is by killing his master.
Yeah, right.
And so, it's like a different system of. I mean, it's the ultimate inversion of like washing the disciples' feet, where it's like, if you want to be greater, you serve. On the other side, if you want to be greater, you like try to ascend and take down. And so, yeah, it's just like pretty much the opposite of that.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, from there it's, yeah, you always end up playing yourself if you go down that path, because then it's like, you see the kings in history who, started a chain of violence, and even like the Old Testament, it's like the king or the son kills the king, and then he like brings forth this identity of violence into the kingdom, and then it's going to take like whatever amount of generations to like cleanse that with like a new king that like does things right and then puts things back the way they should be.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah,
because if you're like open, even if you're the one that's rebellious or taking an unrightful place. Oh, this is super interesting. But it's like by doing that, you implicitly say that this is an okay way to ascend to power, or that this is an okay way to like have succession rather than like through lineage or whatever the system you have set up. Which, this is the interesting point, is you look at David and he wouldn't kill Saul, because he's not going to like, set up that pattern, because he realizes it's a self-defeating pattern.
Yeah.
Like as soon as he kills Saul, then like he's established that as the way of succession in some ways.
Yeah.
And so it's like you're by doing that, you're killing yourself. Like not in the exact moment, but you're like setting up the pattern that kills you.
Yeah. Which, okay, just because that is I was actually listening to some Bible Project talking about Saul and David recently, but they were talking about how when you look at the language of when Saul sat at the edge of the cave and he sat there to like go to the bathroom, and then David was right there, and some of his men literally used the language of Genesis chapter 3, where they were like, reach out your hand and like take for your desire. And it's literally this like, take the fruit of your desire, like the desire is in your hand, like take it now,
The
and
apple.
instead he just takes out the cloak to be like, hey, here's some of this cloth, like I didn't kill you, I did not take my desire. And so it's like he undid the doing of the garden,
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah.
I'll mention one more thing. It has nothing to do with any of this.
Okay.
It has to do with the Bible, though.
Oh, okay.
Dude, what's super interesting? So after they take out all the Canaanites, right? There's like this big whole biblical thing about taking out Canaanites, and like they're possibly related to Nephilim, and it's like this cursed race or whatever. Who does Jesus come back to and talk to at the well? A Canaanite woman.
Oh.
Isn't that weird? Like
Wait, I thought she was
I think they're. I mean, one of the women is Canaanite, but yeah, the whatever, the scraps and the dog person.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No way.
It's super weird. Yeah.
That's crazy. I'm gonna have to reread that.
Yeah. I don't know exactly what context it like implies or anything, but it's like the fact that it's kind of like this weird, like Jesus or like God in some way like asked the Israelites to take out her whole race, but then he like comes back on the other end and like basically like not affirms her. I don't know exactly.
Oh,
what
he's
he
got
says.
grace for her too.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's kind of offering like a solution for whatever their race entails or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, because she referred to herself as a dog eating the scrapes or the crumbs of the children.
Well, I think he referred to him as a dog first. He said it's like
I think.
like he's like basically it's
Yeah, that's right. He did call her a dog.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then, yeah, he's like basically like the kingdom is or whatever the bread or whatever he's bringing isn't for them or something.
Yeah.
The dogs or
She
the
was
children.
She was like, even the dogs eat the crumbs. He
Yeah.
was like, touche. All right, I'll heal your thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah.
So if you get crafty with Jesus, he honors that apparently.
Gotta get in a mind battle.
That was a good argument. All right.
Yeah. Well, that's like it. Just seems like it takes some tenacity or some willpower or some not giving up, maybe.
Not giving up. Yeah.
Which is again the woman with the bleeding. You know. It's
Yeah.
like, just don't give up.
Jesus honored the people who were persistent,
Yeah.
who really like worked hard to come after him.
Yeah. I mean, you hear the knock, the seek, and then you shall find.
Yeah.
So, like, there is something to being persistent and not just giving into apathy, I guess. So, I will leave it there. Make sure you don't give into apathy and tune in next week.
Yeah, that's right, people. Well, gosh, yeah, if you made it to the end,
Congratulations.
cheers to you.
I just noticed we're not recording. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
It's like, oh, really? That'd be terrible.
No, we're good. We're solid.
It comes in pints.
Yeah, I don't know if we could repeat all the magic in this one.
Yeah, too much magic.
It's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
So,
all right, people. Thanks for listening. Enjoy all the good thoughts from that, and tune in next week. And there'll be, who knows what, something else.
we'll probably still be inspired.
We will still be inspired, bringing inspiration to you.
All right. Good luck, everyone. See ya.